So now let's move on to the assembly of our line following robot. We'll start with the chassis. Now as you can see, there are two parts, and the part that has www.cirrd.com inscribed on it will form the top part of our chassis. So this part will form the bottom. Now in our first step, we are going to put spacers on the holes at the very ends of our base chassis. It's going to look something like that. This is so that it can support the top layer, and that has to be put on later. So let's screw these in place, shall we? Take one of the smallest screws in your kit, insert it from underneath. Simply put your spacer on top and screw it in place. Make sure that you are using the large 1-inch spacers in your kit for this part of it. Now repeat the same thing in the next hole. Take a screw, put it through and roll. Repeat the same thing on these at the very ends of your chassis. So now we've got our spacers in place like this. If you need to tighten it, you can always use a screwdriver and tighten the screws at the bottom. Now moving on to the next part. As you can see, there's a number of holes on our base, and you'll notice 3 holes in a triangular shape right here at the very front. You'll also notice that our caster wheel has 3 holes in a triangular shape similarly. So for our next step, we are going to put our caster wheel under this part and align the holes perfectly so as to fit our caster wheel in place. So simply put a screw through there, put your caster wheel through there, get a nut, put it in place, get a nut, put it in place, use your screwdriver and tighten it. And just do the same thing with 2 more screws, like that and like that, and tighten it from the bottom, and your caster wheel is set. So now we've fixed our caster wheel in place, we've tightened it and it's firm. So let's move on to the next part. So now we'll be fixing our motors in place. We're using 2 battery operated motors for our line following robot. Now the alignment of our motors is very important when it comes to the smooth operation of this robot. So pay very close attention to make sure that you fix your motors in the right place. As you can see on your base, there's 2 slits over here, and there's also 2 slits at the very edge. So one motor will fit right here in between these 2 slits, and one motor will fit right here in between these 2 slits. So with that being said, let's put our first motor in place. Now a couple of other things you want to make sure when you're fixing your motor is that, as you can see, there are 2 holes on your BO motor. Now this is for the screw to go through so that it can be held in place. So first simply keep your motor like that, and this gives you a vague idea of how your motor is going to be positioned on your base. The rotor, as you can see, comes somewhere at the midpoint of these 2, and you've also got your 2 holes at the midpoint of the slit. So now that you've understood that, you're going to take this T holder, slide it right through the bottom like that, put your motor right here like that, and your motor is essentially going to be sandwiched between these two holders like this. So to make this easy, you want to take one of the medium screws, put a screw through one of the holders like that. You want to bring this back in position like that. And now what you want to do is you want to simply put this in there, and you want to put this screw right through the hole like that. Make sure it fits in through the hole over here, pretty much like that. And as you can see, that's pretty firm, it's holding in place. So now you just need to tighten it at the edge with a nut. So put your nut there. Tighten it just a little bit. And use your screwdriver to do the final touches and just hold it in place. So with that, you've got one part of it in place. What you also want to do is put one more bolt through here and tighten it here, and repeat the same procedure on this side so as to have your BO motors fixed to your base. So now as you can see, I've fixed both the BO motors in place. Now the part that you probably didn't observe is that I've put two bolts through here, and I've also put two bolts through here on the other side. You want to make sure about certain things when you fix your BO motors. You want to first of all make sure that you've used the medium sized bolts and not the really large ones, because the large ones would protrude here and that would affect further progress in building our robot. And you also want to check the alignment once more. You want to make sure that this rotor is at the midpoint here. Same goes for the other side. And in general, you just want to take a good look at this, and you want to make sure that the alignment of your motors looks something like this. So with that done, we're going to move on to the next part. Now the next part is going to be fixing our battery. This is the battery which will be our power source for our line following robot. Now the battery essentially falls in place like this, and this is how it will be on top of our robot. So now that you can see this, we need to hold this battery in place. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use these holders to hold our battery in place. Now we'll also notice two holes over here on the bottom and two holes here right next to our motors at the base of our robot. Now at the base on this chassis, as you can see, we've got these four holes, and our battery is going to essentially fall in between these four holes. What you want to do is you want to put this holder parallel right above those holes on the base. You want to take a long screw, you want to put it right through, make sure it's gone through both the holes perfectly. If you're having difficulty, you can always try using another screw. So make sure that's gone in perfectly. Do the same thing here. So that looks firm. Now you want to put two nuts at the bottom. Make sure you're holding this battery tightly in place. And at the bottom, as you can see, I'm going to put the nut over there like that. Put the next one like that. Tighten it if you need to with a screwdriver. Make sure it's firm. That's one part of it done. Now you want to make sure that you do the same thing on this end with this one as well. Put the screws right through and make sure the battery is fixed in place. So now we've got our battery solid, fixed in place. So let's just do a quick recap of all that we've got. We've got our spacers, we've got our BO motors aligned perfectly, and we've also got our battery now solid, firm and stuck to the base of our robot. So now next we'll be fixing our wheels. So the wheels will connect to the rotor of our motors, but you want to make sure you don't just push them in there. You want to focus, and as you can see on each of the wheels there's a little square or rather rectangle shaped slit, and you'll also notice that our BO motors on the rotor also have a similar shape. So when you fix the wheel, you want to make sure that you've aligned them perfectly so that the wheel just slips right in. You want to do the same thing on this side, just like that, and now your wheels are in place. So now that the wheels are fixed, we're pretty much done with the bottom half of our robot, and well, this is just a quick overview of what it looks like. You want to make sure it looks like this. You also want to make sure you've checked the alignment. As you can see, the part that's slightly flat in front, this is the front of your robot, and the back is a very clear curve. So with that said, the bottom half is pretty much done. Let's move on to the top part. This will form the top part of our robot. Now these 4 screws here, as you can see, is what we'll use to hold our circuit board in place. So let's put some spacers on to do that. You want to insert the small screws from the bottom. Take your 1/4 inch spacers, the small ones, and simply put them on like that. If you're having some trouble, just try another spacer. That's one. That's two. That's 3, and just one more to go. So with that, you've got your spacers in place to hold your circuit board. So now we've got our small spacers in place. Let's move on to the next part. You're going to take the 2 IR sensors which you have. Now the 2 IR sensors will be at the very front of our robot, but since we need the connections to go to our circuit board, we're going to first put them through these little slits over here. Now when you're putting it through this small little square in the front, you want to make sure that you put it from the top down to the bottom. So that's one IR sensor. Put it in like that. Do the same thing with the next one, from top down to bottom like that. And now you want to pull them out through this rectangle in the middle like this. Now once you've done that, you're also going to take the lower half of your robot, and all the wires that you see coming out from here, we're going to take these through here as well. So take the wires from the lower half, from your motors and from your battery, and put them through this rectangle in the middle. So that's one. That's two. And with that, we've got all our wires through. So now just lay it on top like that. Make sure you've put it exactly over the 1 inch spacers that you'd put at the bottom. and simply screw them in place. You want to put all 4 screws and tighten them, and just repeat this for all 4. So now we've got the top part fixed, we've got it screwed on all these 4 sides to the spacers at the bottom. It's nice and firm. Before moving on, one more thing that we just want to make sure is that there's uniformity, as in the top and the bottom part. You want to make sure that this curved part is the same on the top and the bottom, so that the back is the same for both. And you want to check the same thing in the front to make sure that this flat part is the same for the top and the bottom, so that there's uniformity in the build of our robot. So next we are going to put our circuit board on top of our 4 small spacers. Just put it in place like that and screw it in place. Or if you're having some difficulty screwing it in, just try that screw on another location first. But essentially you've got that idea. You screw it in place, that's 1 down, just screw the remaining 4 as well, and you've got your circuit board fixed. So now for our next step, we are going to fix our 2 metal clamps. Now these metal clamps will provide the support for our IR sensors in the front, and well, as you can see, you've got 2 holes right here in the front, and you've also got holes on our clamp. So we're going to fix our clamp like that in place. Put a screw right through, take a nut, this might be a little tricky, but you want to get this nut right underneath your screw, and then just use a screwdriver to tighten it in place. And then just repeat the same thing on this side as well, so that your clamps are in place. So now, as you can see, we've fixed our clamps at the very front of our robot. So for our next step, we're going to fix our IR sensors to these, but you have to make sure that you don't directly connect our IR sensor to the metal clamp, as it will get shorted. What you're going to do is use double side tape. So simply cut a strip of double side tape, open it up, stick one bit just underneath your IR sensor like that, and the other bit like that, and that's one, and just do the same thing with the other sensor as well. So now we fixed our IR sensors at the very front of our robot, and we are at the last and final stage of our assembly. Now we need to connect the wires from our various sensors and motor to our circuit board. So first, identify your wire from the left infrared sensor, and once you've got that, make sure you place it over the port for your left infrared sensor, like that. Next, find the right infrared sensor, find the wire corresponding to that one, and place it over the port for the right infrared sensor. Now in the same way, identify the wires from your motors. You want to make sure you've taken the wire from the left motor, and as you can see here, you can see the front, you can see the left and the right ports for the motors. So once you've identified your wire from the left motor, you want to give that right here to the port for the left, and same thing for the wire from the right motor, give it to right. So now that we've connected to all the ports, we're at the last and final step in the assembly, which is connecting our battery. So as you can see, we can see the terminals from our battery here, and what you want to do is you want to simply strip off the edges. So now you've got your wire coming out from there. Now remember that the red part, the red wire, is positive and the black wire is negative. So we are now going to give this to our circuit board at the power supply. This is where our battery input will be given. As you can see, there is a positive and negative marked on the circuit board for it. So what we are going to do is we are going to loosen these screws a little bit, put the red wire in the positive, loosen the screw a bit more if you have to. Put the red wire right there in the positive, hold it in place, tighten the screw. Do the same thing with the negative wire, hold it in place. As you can see, our robot's already starting to run. Tighten the screw, and with that, our positive and negative have been connected. Our line following robot in terms of its assembly and build is complete.